What's up, guys? Today is your exam review. Let's just jump right into it because we have a lot to go over. So this is your Unit 1 Ecology exam review. The exam is on the 8th and the 9th of October, depending on if you're A day or B day. All these resources are posted on Google Classroom, so this exam review, all of the notes, all of my videos from YouTube, so you can rewatch them, exit tickets, and virtual notebooks. All of them are all on Google Classroom. So essentially, there's no reason to fail this test because I've given you so much resources, so many things that you can reuse over and over again. And of course, you always can reach me and talk to me if you're struggling with anything. Okay, so the exam is going to be 30 multiple choice questions on Eduphoria. There is a lockdown browser, which means you will not be able to click off and go on to other things. And every single topic that we've covered so far in class and also in this review will be on that exam. After the exam is going to be body animal systems or animal body systems. So circulatory system, respiratory, all of that fun stuff. So make sure that you're taking notes as you do this exam review. I recommend just getting a little notepad or something so you can write things down. Okay, so first topic to review is levels of organization. So of course we had biotic and abiotic factors. Everyone should know biotic means living, abiotic are non-living things. So which of these is an abiotic factor? Right? So C, an ocean current of cold water, right? So trees, bears, and fungi, moss, they're all living organisms. However, an ocean current, water is not living, water is abiotic. So to recap the levels of organization, so an individual organism is going to be one living thing. A population is going to be multiple living things that are the same exact species. A community is going to be different species living together. An ecosystem includes all living and non-living factors. And then the biosphere is the entire Earth. So what level organization are these students observing? So Jesus says that he sees two platypuses swimming around. What level of organization is that? How about Diego? Diego says, I see one pink fish. Daniela, I see fishes swimming around the different plants. And Jasmine, I see that the water is warm, which makes the platypuses and fishes happy. Good. So here are the answers. So I see two platypuses swimming around. If you see two platypuses, that's a population because it's their same species living in the same area. I see one pink fish. That's an organism. It's one living thing. I see fishes swimming around the different plants. So we talked about fishes and we talked about the different plants. So that is going to be a community, right? Because it's more than one species. There's a species of fish. There's species of plants. Those are all different species. I see that the water is warm, which makes the platypuses and fish happy. So we talked about warm water. He observed the water is warm. He observed that there are platypuses and the fish are both happy. So that is an abiotic factor and two biotic factors. So that is called an ecosystem. Okay, so this is another way of looking at it. So we have the biosphere up here, which is the entire world. Then we have biomes, which are just like certain types of environments, like a desert or a rainforest. It's just a type of environment. The ecosystem, which is the living and non-living things in one place. A community, all the same different species. They're all living though. And then a population is when they're all the same species versus an organism is one individual living thing. So the most complex is going to be the biggest thing. The biggest thing here is going to be that biosphere. The biosphere is the biggest thing. And the least complex is going to be the organism. So it gets less and less complex as you go down. Okay. One thing to also note is that the biosphere is big, right? It includes all of these other things. The biosphere is really big, includes all those other things. A community includes various populations and includes different organisms. So you would say that a community is part of the biosphere. It would not be correct to say that the biosphere is part of a community because biosphere is more complex. It can't be part of a community. Okay, so true or false? An organism is part of a community. This is true. So look right here. Organism is down here. It's less complex. Community is up here. That's big. In a community, you have different organisms living. So an organism is going to be part of a community. Okay, true or false? A community is more complex than the biosphere. True or false? A community is more complex than the biosphere. This is false, right? Here's community down here. It's small versus the biosphere is the entire Earth. That's the most complex level. Okay, next topic, symbiosis. So the symbiotic relationships, hopefully everyone should remember these. Mutualism, plus plus, they're both being benefited. Commensalism, plus zero, or maybe even plus slash, whatever just means plus and neutral. One is unaffected. And then parasitism is plus minus, where one of them is hurt. Okay, so example of mutualism is when a flower gets pollinated by bees and bees get nectar, they're both being benefited by that interaction. That's mutualism. Commensalism, main example, a whale has barnacles on it, it's unaffected. The whale doesn't care about the barnacles. But the barnacles being on the whale means that the barnacles get to find food. So the barnacles are being benefited while the whale is unaffected. So that's a commensalism relationship. And then a tick is going to get blood, that's a benefit for it. And it gets to irritate the cat, so the cat is being hurt in some way, so that would be parasitism. So your friend is confused on symbiosis. Can you help them out? What is the difference between mutualism and commensalism? Okay, so mutualism, they're going to both be benefited, while in commensalism, one benefits and one is unaffected. What is the relationship between humans and lice? How do you know? So here's what lice look like on a human's head. What is the relationship? Would it be mutualism, parasitism, or commensalism? Right? It's going to be parasitism because the lice are going to get blood while the human is being hurt. Competition, resources are limited. So for example of a resource could be water, space, like space to grow and live, or even light if you're in the case of a plant where you need light to do photosynthesis. Right? So organisms that are living in the same place doing the same thing must compete if they want to survive. Okay, if an invasive species suddenly shows up, then the natives, the ones that have been there, the native species have to compete better if they want to continue to survive. So example of an invasive species, so the Asian carp is this fish that's very fast growing, it's very aggressive, and it can adapt very well to different ecosystems. And basically when the Asian carp gets put into a lake or a river of some sort, it's going to be better, faster, and stronger than those native fish, which means it's going to outcompete. It's going to steal all the food and all the habitat. Then those native fish are now going to die out, right? And we know that that's very bad for ecosystems. So how could two tigers living in the same area avoid competing with each other, avoid this competition? Right? So if they live and hunt in a very specific way, in a very specific place, then that is what's good for them. So for example, this first tiger female might want to stay right here in this area, while this third female is going to mark her area as that, and then there's a second female here that marks her area right there. And essentially, they don't have much overlap. And by doing that, by living and hunting in a specific place, in a specific area, they're avoiding all that unnecessary competition, that unnecessary interactions. Okay, this also, plants do this, bacteria do this, you and I do this. We all kind of avoid competition by having a specific area in which we feed, in which we hunt, in which we do whatever we need to do. Okay, succession. So succession is that rebuilding of an ecosystem after a disaster. Succession is the rebuilding of an ecosystem after a disaster. Okay, so this is what it could look like after some sort of disaster, right? There's no life. And then slowly and surely over decades and decades, we start to grow bigger and bigger trees and whatnot, right? So succession, we have primary succession. That's when it starts with the bare rock. Then there's lichens and moss that are the pioneer species that are going to break down that rock over a very long period of time. Then years later, grasses and other things can begin to grow. I have another type of succession that's called just secondary succession. Soil still present in secondary succession after the disaster. Remember those S's, right? Soil still secondary. That's how you can remember that very easily. Small grasses begin to grow almost immediately, and then bushes, trees, etc. can begin growing after that. So which one do you think is faster? Secondary succession is definitely going to be faster because soil is still present, right? Versus primary succession is going to take longer because that lichen and moss has to break down the rock. Okay, as time continues in ecological succession, population density, so how densely packed our populations are going to increase. What else increases? Exactly, biodiversity is going to increase. At the beginning of succession, we might have very little soil, very little grass, very little organisms at all. And then over time, we get more and more different organisms, right? And as we get more and more different organisms, our biodiversity, the diversity of life, is increasing. Energy flow through food chain. Sorry if I'm going really fast. I'm really trying to make this video short. So what is blank, and give me an example? What is an autotroph, and give me an example? What is a heterotroph, and give me an example? So autotrophs are going to make their own food automatically, while heterotrophs must eat other organisms to get their food. So example of an autotroph is, example of heterotroph, yes, exactly. So autotrophs are also known as producers, right? These are the plants, the photosynthetic bacteria, our phytoplankton, and chemoautotrophs. They're the producers. But we have heterotrophs, right? They're the consumers. The primary heterotroph, the primary consumer, is going to eat the plant. Then the secondary consumer eats that primary. The tertiary consumer eats that secondary. And that quaternary consumer eats that tertiary. So they each are eating each other. One thing that I've noticed that people have been getting wrong on Edpuzzle and on virtual notebooks, guys, primary, yes, you can call this a primary producer. This can be a primary producer. This is a primary consumer. Okay, so make sure that you are labeling primary consumers and primary producers differently. Okay? Where do autotrophs get their energy from? The sun, exactly. Where do primary consumers get their energy from? Autotrophs, right? Because primary consumers are literally eating the autotrophs. What do the arrows in a food web show? What are these arrows showing? The transfer of energy. So right here, the sun gives energy to the grass gives energy to the antelope gives energy to the lion. What is the 10% rule? Right, so energy transfer is very inefficient. Only about 10% of energy is passed on from one trophic level up to the next. That other 90% is actually lost as heat and waste. Okay, so from here to here, 10% is passed. 90% is lost as heat and waste. Okay. 10% is passed up each trophic level. So right here on the bottom, let's say this green algae level, the primary producer level, has about 20,000 kcal. If I want to calculate how much energy we expect for this level, the mollusk level, to have, how much would you say? You would take 10% of 2,000. If I asked you, what amount of energy would you expect for the slimy sculpin to have at the secondary consumer level? You would take 2,000 and take 10% of that, which would be about 200. Okay, that's another thing I saw in virtual notebooks that a lot of people were getting wrong. I asked you about the slimy sculpin level. A lot of people gave me the mollusk level. You need to pay attention to what the question is asking you. If I ask for slimy sculpin, you do 10% and then 10 more percent to get up here. Okay, make sure that you're doing 10% each time. Okay, again, that 90% is lost as heat and waste. So 10% is passed on, 90% is lost as heat and waste. Okay, so let's look at this food web right here. We're going to recap the domino effect. So if shrews were killed off, what might you expect to happen? Okay, so I went ahead and erased the other organisms because we're not worried about them. All right, so without shrews. So shrews give their energy to the hawk, and it gives its energy to the snake. And I know that because I see the arrow pointing towards them. Okay, what could help? Okay, so if the shrews die off, then they're no longer giving their energy to the snakes. So without shrews as their food source, snakes would only have one other food source. What is that other food source? The frog, right? Those are the two arrows that are pointing to the snake, shrews and frogs. So without shrews, snakes might starve to death. What could stop snakes from starving to death? If they ate more frogs, right? So in order for snakes to maintain their same population size, they're going to need to eat more frogs now. Because usually they would eat frogs and shrews, but if shrews are all gone, they're going to have to eat more frogs, right? Okay. True or false? A hawk is both a secondary and tertiary consumer in this ecosystem. So let's look at this food web, right? And I want you to tell me, this hawk, can it be a secondary consumer and can it be a tertiary consumer? So first things first, we're going to label our autotrophs, which is, in this example, there's only the grass. Whoever the autotroph gives its energy to, so the grasshopper, the rabbit, and the mouse, those are all going to be primary consumers. So I'm going to put a 1 on them. Whoever the primary consumers give their energy to, see how I'm following the arrows? Primary consumer, boom. Primary consumer, arrow. Primary consumer, arrow. Okay? All of those things are going to be secondary consumers. Okay? See that? Secondary consumers. Okay? Whoever the secondary consumers give their energy to are tertiary consumers. So tertiary consumer, tertiary consumer. Okay, so this is a true statement. A hawk is both a secondary and tertiary consumer in this ecosystem. Carbon and nitrogen cycles. So the nitrogen cycle, nitrogen-fixing bacteria. They live in plant roots. The bacteria gets shelter from predators and plants get nitrogen they need to grow. What type of symbiosis is this? Okay, that is mutualism. Fertilizer runoff. So chemical runoff, for example, from fertilizers and sewers and construction sites, causes what is called an algal bloom and a dead zone. Algal blooms and dead zones are places of very low oxygen in a lake or river. So as you can see, this is some sort of chemical plant. There's fertilizer runoff into the water, and that's what's causing an algal bloom or a dead zone. Okay, the carbon cycle in terms of the ocean's role. So phytoplankton are going to be these organisms that live in the ocean. They're autotrophs. When they do photosynthesis, they're going to take in a lot of carbon, and they do more photosynthesis in the colder oceans. Okay, so a cooler ocean is going to have strong mixing. They really like it, so they're going to mix up all together. And as they mix up all together, they're going to be able to do lots of photosynthesis. In a warmer ocean, they're going to have weak mixing. That's going to be a reduced photosynthesis and reduced phytoplankton. Okay, so in a cooler ocean, it can do more, and in a warm ocean, it does less. Okay, so photosynthesizer's role, carbon dioxide plus water plus light is going to produce oxygen and sugars. So photosynthesis actually removes excess carbon from the air. As you can see, CO2 is going into the plant, and what comes out? Oxygen. CO2 is going into the plant, and what comes out? Oxygen. So as organisms do photosynthesis, they're taking in oxygen, or they're taking in carbon dioxide. Ecosystem stability. So climate change. Humans are actually disrupting the carbon cycle because we pump excess CO2 into the air through cars, airplanes, natural gas, and burning coal. We are contributing to global warming a lot. This is our carbon footprint. All of these different things are affecting the carbon cycle. Okay, so how can we fix the carbon cycle? Well, we can increase photosynthesis rates here on Earth. And how can we do that? We can increase photosynthesis by planting more trees and by keeping oceans cooler, okay? Because remember, our phytoplankton like it to be cool in their oceans. They can mix a lot if it's cool. Adaptations, the last topic. Adaptations are actually this thing that increase an organism's survival or reproduction in a particular ecosystem. So these three organisms, the camel, the kangaroo rat, and the phoenix fox, they all live in deserts, right? And we know in deserts, there's lots of heat, there's not a lot of rain. So these organisms have actually adapted to their environment by actually having bodies that can tolerate very high temperatures. Okay, camel has things stored in its hump that help it. The kangaroo rat actually has these increased loops in their kidneys. Okay, think about it. So I'm not going to give you the answer to this, but we know that some plants have long roots and other plants have short roots, right? Why might some plants' roots be adapted to be longer? What is down here that they might be wanting to tap into and get? Okay. Last but not least, the two categories of um, adaptations that we talked about with their physical appearance. So some organisms will want to avoid predators altogether, while other ones will want to warn predators to stay away. So avoiding predators, an organism that is hidden, so for example, camouflage in some way, cannot be easily seen by predators. If it can't be seen, then the predator can't eat or kill it, right? While certain organisms stick out, they look bright, they have crazy colorings, right? And so and a predator sees that crazy coloring, the predator's like, whoa, that organism got to be poisonous. So the predator actually stays away. So it's a warning to stay away. Okay? While organisms that cannot be seen are avoiding predators altogether because predators can't see them. Okay? Right? And think about it. This looks more like a warning, right? This is a warning to stay back. While this is an avoiding mechanism, it allows it to avoid the predator altogether. Okay, so if you have these vocab words and ideas in your head, you will do very well on the test. Sorry, it was a little bit rushed. Like I said, I'm trying to make it short so everyone can get through it in enough time. And again, look over the test review, look over notes, everything on Google Classroom. Like I'm here for you, and your test is coming up very quickly.